For more on the prison theory, I spoke to AEI economist Nick Eberstadt, and I asked how much of a role does he think prison has on the employment outcomes for these men.
We'd estimate that today there are about 20 million Americans. I mean, it's almost the size of your country. 20 million Americans, overwhelmingly men, who are not behind bars but have a felony conviction in their past. That would work out to be about 1 in 8 adult guys in my country today. I have no doubt that this has made a big impact on America's bad work situation for men. We always wonder, why are labor force participation rates in the U.S. so much worse than in Western Europe or Japan, which has had a generation of lost growth, or in your country or New Zealand or Canada? One thing that is characteristically different in the U.S. from all other rich societies is the extraordinarily large number of sentenced people we have in our society. I think this has to have something to do with it.
Could the missing male workers also be related to the reduction in, shall we call it stereotypical male work, manufacturing, construction, all those kinds of things? There's less jobs of that these days, more jobs in the services industry. Could that play a role in this?
Oh, it certainly must play a role. It plays a role in this all around the world, in all of the affluent societies, but not as severe as in the USA. I mean, if you take a look, for example, at the percentage of manufacturing jobs to total jobs, Australia's percentage of manufacturing jobs is lower than the US. It's had the same sort of decline over the last half century, but not the same bad results. So we have to, I think, look at additional factors.
I know you also found certain regions had more of these missing male workers than other regions. What regions were they?
Well, in the United States, the familiar one is West Virginia, in our Appalachian region, where there was a collapse of coal and mining industries quite a while ago, and where there's never been a recovery. In places in New England, for example, in the state of Maine, there's been a big problem with the collapse of work for men. One of the things which is quite curious about this, however, is that we see a paradoxical situation where some of the states which have the most distress are adjacent to some of the states which seem to have the most vibrant labor markets for men. When I was taught economics back in the Stone Age, I was told that in national markets things tended to seek equilibrium over time. What's happened in the U.S. is exactly the opposite. The state-by-state differences have gotten more and more extreme over the last 40 years. And I don't think that can be explained by economics alone.
Yeah, so why would you think they're not moving? Like, it would make sense they would move. Why don't they move?
Well, part of this has to do, I think, with less dynamism in small businesses in the U.S. It has to do, I think, perhaps also with the increasing share of Americans who are tethered to means-tested benefits, because in our federal system, means-tested benefits don't always transport from one state to the next. And we've already discussed the explosion of our invisible sentenced population. There are millions and millions of men who are either on probation or on parole, and I think it's rather difficult to ask one's parole officer in Georgia if you can go to Hawaii.
Finally, what are the ramifications of having this large mass of alienated, disassociated people rumbling around in a country where there are already so many seemingly very unhappy people?
Well, I mean, if you look at what's happened in the U.S. Over the last, let's say, since the beginning of the year 2000, in terms of private wealth holdings, there's no country in the world that's done what the United States has done. We've added $50 trillion almost of private wealth holdings since the year 2000. That's more than two China's worth of wealth, two current China's worth of wealth. There's no place that's done what we do with wealth generation. At the same time, if you look at employment, we'd need 11 million additional jobs to get back to the male plus female work rate that we had in the year 2000. More wealth than ever for the wealth holders, much less work for the workers. I'd say that's a framework for a classical populist storm, and it looks like we just had one. I don't know that we're going to see the sorts of riots in the streets that people are familiar with in France and some other parts of Europe. So far, the unworking men are mainly inert. They don't get out that much. But unhappiness and social anxiety and pain are very much part of the tableau, and I think all Americans have to be concerned with the well-being of this very distressed population.
Dr. Eberstadt, thanks for your time.
Hey, thanks for inviting me.